with us today via telephone from Massachusetts, I believe, is Aaron Weissblum, the author of this particular game. How you doing, Alan? Or Aaron?
Just fine, Bob, thanks.
We were talking about Alan Moon, and all of a sudden I'm calling him Alan.
You get called all kinds of names.
Again, Aaron Weissblum, thanks a lot. We really appreciate you being here. We're going to spend some time talking to you in a second. I just want to quickly go over the name of the game, Cloud9. FX Schmidt, USA, is the producer. 2 to 6 players, age 10 and up, pretty much covers the basics. I think most of our games that we played took maybe 20 to 40 minutes for the long version, which we'll be discussing later too. Aaron, why don't you run through quickly the general play of the game, or if not the general play, at least the general idea of it.
Sure, I'll give you the gist. The gist of the game is that, and we'll talk about it with respect to the theme, we're all on a balloon together, and the game consists of a series of balloon rides. And on your turn, it's your responsibility to keep the balloon afloat. And as long as people are able to do that, the balloon goes higher and higher. The higher the balloon goes, the more points people have an opportunity to score. The key decision that you make when you're playing is when it's not your turn, someone else's turn, you have to decide whether you think the person whose turn it is has the cards that would be required to keep the balloon going. So it's really a game about trying to judge whether other people have the cards that they would need. And you have a chance to jump off the balloon at any time and float down safely with points. And if you wait too long, you get nothing.
Okay. Well, that pretty much gives people a basic flavor of the game. Why don't we run through as we normally do with Drew taking the components. And what do you think we got here, Drew?
I really do like these components. I like the board. I like the artwork on them. The pieces, these wood guys, very thick. You know, these are great.
Guys,
these are great. They have the balloon piece.
That represents where the balloon is height-wise in the atmosphere here.
And
which, by the way, is the same exact piece. I don't know if Aaron even knows this. Is the exact same piece in
Montgolfier? Exactly. Well,
yeah.
we could go into that story. Alan Mooner is responsible for that. I think he did his sourcing from the same company that made the Montgolfier.
Well, see, that was a little question I had to ask.
Yeah, I know. That's pretty cool.
I just feel like we got a scoop on the boardroom.
Yeah, that's
top story.
You guys are sharp.
Well, I'll tell you, we certainly are. Drew, take us through the rest of them.
Oh, then we have the cards. Pretty much there's 3 types of cards. There are color cards, which you'll use to fulfill
whatever die roll
you have to
fill.
Raise the balloon. It's red, blue, yellow, and green. You have umbrella card, which is kind of like a wild card, and you can use that to fulfill
satisfy whatever.
Yeah, if you don't have it. And then there's the pass the barn card,
which I think's the great one.
Yeah,
that's one I like.
I can make you roll, so I can try to jump off the cloud and get points.
We're going to explain that a little better with example as we go. But so basically what the barn does is allow one of the players who doesn't think it's particularly a good time for him to be rolling to force it on somebody else and get off the balloon and collect. If you're on the balloon, you can't collect. You may not even make your roll. But nevertheless, I want to run to some strategies and mechanisms that are inherent in the game. Why don't you run through some of that for us, Aaron?
Sure. Well, I think one of the most important strategies in the game is to try to get into a situation where you can use your cards to benefit yourself, maybe one other person, but not everyone. And this, of course, would apply to a game where there are a number of players. And I'd say the game is, in my opinion, the game is probably best with 4 or 5 players. And when you guys demonstrate it, you'll have fewer just because you don't have that many people in the studio. But one of the greatest things you can do in the game is end up by yourself on the balloon with a whole handful of cards.
Yeah,
happened to us.
Because that'll allow you to keep going and going and get a whole bunch of points and leave everyone else behind.
Cost me the second game last night.
Exactly.
That's exactly what happened. Somebody just ran away from us.
If you can do that, you're doing great. And so now, if you play with what I guess you call the grown-up version of the game, which we always use, you don't necessarily have to use your cards even if you have them. There's the bluffing aspect of the game comes in. So let's say it's your turn and you roll 2 red, and so you're going to play 2 red cards to keep the balloon going. You can fake and say, no, I don't have the 2 red cards, and And the reason you would do that is because why should you spend your cards and benefit everyone? And now, if you do that, people can challenge you, and you get punished if and thrown off if you actually could have made the play. So the bluffing aspect is where a lot of the strategy comes in, and also just the simple strategy is trying to keep a little bit of a memory of who you think has what cards left in their hand, and it's also a judgment call. Is it worth the risk of staying on, or is it better to hop off and get your points while you can? The similar to some other games that your watchers might be familiar with. For example, Can't Stop. You probably know that game.
Oh, sure.
It's a lot like that.
Sid Saxon.
You want to, it's kind of a push your luck type of thing. Only in this game, it's not just yourself; it's with respect to other people also.
Well, I like the advanced rules, I guess you would call it. Not just the bluffing, which certainly was interesting, but each card has like a second purpose, and there's other things you can do to kind of push people off, which really adds to the flavor of
Makes it more vicious for sure.
And certainly there's a lot of people out there that understand that kind of play.
It's interesting that you mentioned those rules because we simplified the game, and we do in the original one of the original versions of the game. There were actually special cards to do things like throwing people off the ship and slightly nastier things. We took those out in order to kind of streamline the game, make it a little easier to learn, maybe make it a little more mass market, and then we reintroduced those options, those play options. As that actually was an idea that Alan Moon got. Speaking, I guess we were going to talk about him.
We will.
And he works for the company that produced the game. And he thought, he liked those elements, but he wanted to keep the components simple. So that's how those got added back in.
Fair enough.